Great morning, great afternoon, great evening, wherever this conversation finds you. I am Travis Gray. This is Gray Transforms, and today we are transforming with our guest, Jevon Dangeli. I hope I got that right. Jevon has been a hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, and transpersonal coach for 20 years. He currently is an instructor and academic tutor at Alef Trust, where he developed and teaches in the coaching certificate program. Jevon, we've had a great conversation prior to this. We connected in 2017 in your presentation on open awareness. I'm so excited for all of the value that this conversation will give the audience, will give people around the world that get a chance to tune into this. How are you?
Travis, I'm really good today. Very excited to be having this conversation with you. Since 2017, it's been a long time in the coming. So here we are.
Right, we're coming full circle. I love connecting with the scholars, the peers in our tribe of transpersonal psychology. So this is really amazing. So you have this background in hypnotherapy, NLP work, some of these coaching modalities and things. Where did that? What is the story of how Jevon got into transpersonal psychology?
Well, if I started at the beginning, it would be a long story. I don't think we'll go there completely.
Okay.
But you mentioned the hypnotherapy and the NLP, which I've been practicing since about 2000 and teaching in my role as an NLP trainer, hypnotherapy trainer since 2004. And those were mainly in-person trainings that took place at various locations around the world. And that went really well. It's beautiful work. I've
Yeah.
always had a very holistic and integrative position in that work and have thought transpersonally. And as my own practice and research led me to Alef Trust, where I completed the MSc in Transpersonal Psychology, Spirituality, and Consciousness, then I found myself kind of veering away from NLP and hypnotherapy techniques into an even more holistic container in which we hold space for individuals and groups to go through the transformative process. And when completing the training at Alef Trust in 2015, I was invited to develop and start to teach the Transpersonal Coaching Psychology program that's been running strong there ever since. And so we've moved steadily more online, but I still love doing the in-person training and retreats, which I run actively every year at various locations around the world, and love engaging with people that love to think transpersonally. And my own kind of specialized way of working and living, I think, has emerged since then. So I'm happy to speak more about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I find your work to be highly practical, and I think that it is really it's really necessary in the field of transpersonal psychology that can get really big thinking. It can get really metaphysical thinking, but you have a grounded practice, a grounded way of. I did read your master's thesis, and you have a grounded way of looking at all of these transpersonal topics in a very pragmatic way that I really value. I really value the transpersonal pragmatism in the world. I think that it is necessary. It is needed. So what got you to get involved in maybe the master's program at Alef Trust? How did you find that program? What was was there an experience for you early on that invited you to tap deeper into transpersonal as a field? What was that like for you? How did that come about?
I'm trying to trace the roots of this calling. It feels like it's always been there.
Okay.
And I was interested in transpersonal psychology before I even knew about the formal field of research and practice.
Absolutely.
And I remember reading a book by Richard Bachet, if I am pronouncing his name correctly, The Living Classroom. That was back in about 2010 or 11, maybe 12. No, but 12 I'd started the MSc. And that led me to look at where can one do transpersonal psychology courses online. And that brought me to Alef Trust. I live in Europe, so I didn't feel like flying around the world. I'm aware of possibilities in the USA that have existed since the start of the field. And I was looking for something European, UK based. And Alef Trust literally emerged at that time. Alef Trust came into existence formally in 2012. And I was among the very first cohort of MSc students that went through there. And I've been with them ever since. We're like one great big community today.
That's awesome. I see the parallel, the mirroring in my journey. When I found out about transpersonal psychology was in 2012, 13. And in 2013 was the first bachelor's completion program at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology that had just switched to the name Sophia University. So right at the same time that you're joining in Alef Trust programs, I was also in the first cohort of this pioneering program at Sophia University. So that's really cool to find out that we have some parallels in that way. So in 2017, we met in Prague, and I was quickly fascinated by this intervention, this tool that you offered, which is called open awareness. Can you tell us a little bit about open awareness?
With pleasure. Look, open awareness is a term that's used all over the place, and different people understand it differently. And I guess the majority of people who have come across open awareness probably have heard about it as a phenomenon associated with a state of consciousness that one accesses in meditation or mindfulness practice. And I think about open awareness like that too. But what has interested me as a pragmatic person all the years that I've been engaging in spiritual practice and meditation, which long precedes coming to study transpersonal psychology, I kept going to various spiritual and meditation retreats at different locations around the world, spent a lot of time in the Himalaya and in Australia and New Zealand. And on returning to some of these places, I kept meeting the same people. And in conversations and in shared meditations, I started to discover that a lot of people felt really at home and comfortable in these retreat-like settings, and very uncomfortable when they left the retreats. A lot of them were struggling with trauma and stress, and were not really able to function optimally in, let's call it, the real world outside of retreat. And I've also witnessed how many people who have a spiritual practice are unable to transfer their wise way of being, spiritual insights, and states of consciousness into everyday life. And that question has stayed with me. And I kind of felt myself getting drawn on a path to explore what can we do that brings spirituality off the cushion, off the yoga mat, and out of the dojo into everyday life. I mentioned dojo because I've been engaged in judo since age 5. And for me, judo and other soft martial arts I've also been interested in for millennia, it feels like, all my life that is, have enabled me to have a very embodied state of open awareness as a kind of default of practicing martial arts. And I found that the embodiment of what I've later come to understand as open awareness has served me very well in other areas of life. So there was a link that fed my curiosity. How can spiritual practitioners maintain these very resourceful states of consciousness when the triggers of life happen, stressors at home, at work, and in other areas? And eventually, through my research as part of my master's, I really found what I have considered to be the crucial leverage point. And the issues that clients describe now, because I'm listening for this, I hear it all the time, yeah? But every issue, every emotional problem, every stressor, every time trauma is activated, in every occasion when we feel less than well, our attention has become narrowly fixated on the person or the situation that has activated or triggered that less than resourceful state. This also applies to a spiritual crisis, spiritual emergency. Whenever that is activated, attention is fixated on the person or situation that for us is debilitating, causing us pain, causing us to feel less than whole. And so when we can discover what attention has become fixated on, we use that as a starting point to open the aperture of awareness. And I've been developing all these skills, as my hands demonstrate now, to identify triggers, and in the context of the trigger, use an embodied practice to open the aperture of awareness. And in that more open frame of awareness, there's a new range of responses and creativity and different perspectives that become really useful to us in the presence of that trigger. And so we're able to couple the state associated with tunnel awareness, stress, fear, anger, any kind of negative emotion, or spiritual crisis, with this open, receptive, and ready state of open awareness. And thereby, these two states kind of merge, and we find a new range of responses that was not available to us in that triggering situation before.
That's awesome. I love how your question was very pragmatic. Your question was very practical. That is such an important question in this field of transpersonal psychology, which is a study of wholeness. It's a study of whole transformation. It is a whole person science, a holistic science. And so to look at how does the epitome of spirituality and enlightenment and actualization, how does something like that in its everyday lived experience, how does that manifest in the world off of the cushion, off of the facilitation of a space that is embodying some of those principles? Maybe you're tapping those states momentarily in moments of being guided in meditation by a great master or something. There's a lot of science around the ongoing non-symbolic experience, or this persisting state, as you're speaking of this open awareness. And I love mixed martial arts. I think it is the best sport in the world. I think it requires the most creative movement of the human body. And there's a hero's journey narrative that is built into two people in combat sports against one another. That I think is a beautiful story. It's a whole beautiful dance. And for your ongoing state of open awareness and the way that you're speaking of, for that to have come out of a martial art of judo, for some of that sustained experience in that state, in that awareness, to have come out of judo is really beautiful. It really speaks to the value of the discipline of martial arts. So just to like understand this for people, maybe you can help demonstrate a little bit, but to understand this for people, you're not merely, or are you merely being more aware of your surroundings? Is that all it is at the foundation? I'm just being more aware of my surroundings, the same way as maybe a martial artist or somebody that is in maybe a hairy situation. It needs to be aware of their surroundings, or is it different than this?
It's different.
Mm-hmm.
There certainly is an awareness, an enhanced awareness of the surroundings. I grew up in South Africa. At the time, we were just coming out of apartheid, and there was a lot of upheaval. I mean, South Africa has always had upheaval. But if you're going to be in a place where you need to be vigilant, you need to have eyes at the back of your head, then the skill set to enable you to have that open aperture of awareness so that you can respond in a timely way to any potential dangers is a very useful skill set. But if you go around nervously or full of anxiety, anticipating the next thing that could go wrong, you're also attracting more of what can go wrong into your life. So It's not about being hypervigilant. It's about having an open yet resourceful and calm state of awareness. And that's the aspect of open awareness in which we are more aware of our surroundings, yet in a calm and centered way. The other very important aspect is an equal amount of inward oriented awareness. It's an awareness of the thought process, awareness of emotional states, awareness of sensations in the body. And these days, applied open awareness as we use it in transpersonal coaching, which is what I spent most of my time talking about and teaching and applying, the skill set of open awareness is a somatic one in which we start with the body. We feel the movement of the breath in the belly. We expand awareness to feeling the body as a whole. And in that sensation of the body as a whole, we extend that sensation into the somatic field that is beyond the body. We kind of fill the space where we are intentionally with awareness. And the breath then serves as the bridge between our inner landscape and the outer landscape. The sense of self expands, and the notion of inner and outer starts to kind of lose relevancy when we start to experience ourselves as whole, and everything that we experience is then within. And so that is perhaps a transpersonal orientation that has always been quite conceptual to many. And in applied open awareness, it's an embodied felt experience. The sense of self is expanded. And in that expanded sense of self, there's more of you available to bring to situations in which you might have been stressed before, when you were more identified with the part of the self that got triggered. We now transcend the part, we encompass it, we hold it, we lean in, we listen to its needs. That in turn supports the integration of parts of the psyche that may have come into existence through traumatic events in the past. Yes, it does so in a coaching container, which is wonderful. So transpersonal coaches are trauma informed. They learn how parts of the psyche have come into existence, and they learn to support clients in integrating those parts in a very gentle way, somewhat conversational, using applied open awareness. And in this way, we become more whole, fully functional teams of parts. And when you're a whole team playing for the same side, there's more of you available. That's a high performance state. And so a lot of my work has been with clients that struggle with performance in the workplace, even sports performance, because they're integrating their parts that have been triggered that have caused them to perform less than well. And in so doing, there's more of them available to focus on what's really important in that situation and to even decide what's really important for them. So open awareness has all of these various applications, and it's a very practical skill set.
Yeah, it sounds to me like what I've thought of a lot is that our our attention, especially in this modern age of social media and just the modern age where we are bombarded with so much information, so much stimulus, that is in fact fragmenting and fracturing the parts of ourselves, the parts of our awareness, the parts of our consciousness is being fragmented, it's fractured, it's in all of these pieces, and then we begin to feel less and less of a consistent and ongoing sense of self that remains the same, that feels the same, that is experienced persistently as this is the state that I'm in naturally on an ongoing basis. Rather, we are moving through a lot of these ups and downs and these dips and this experience of a fracturing and fragmenting of self, and then unconsciously that is causing all kinds of problems around maybe our anxiety in our performance in things like this. And so it is great that you are bringing in this not even just this very, very real sense of being whole in the world is now a soft martial art of healing those fractures and fragmentations to be whole in your awareness and opening your awareness. So how does one do this? Can you give us a little practice? Is there something that we could do?
I'd be very glad to lead a very brief sort of lead in toward open awareness. But before I do, just on that point of fracturing and the parts of ourselves that have become kind of split off from the self due to trauma or whatever else, need special care. Otherwise there's no inclination for them to want to reintegrate. And I find that what prohibits us from being integrated, whole, fully functional human beings is largely due to the way we've become overly reliant on these convenient digital devices that a lot of us, including myself, spend an excessive amount of time on. Now, I'm not a gamer who uses a little screen and goes around with my attention narrowly fixated on what I consider judgmentally, I'm afraid, to be nonsense on a screen. But I have young children, and everyone around them is gaming, and their attention becomes narrowly fixated on this tiny little handheld screen. And so we see a generation of digital zombies going around. And I've been exploring this phenomenon too, that when attention becomes entrained in this manner through daily consistent practice of whatever it is that creates this zombie-like mindset, then when we put down the screen and need to engage emotionally, socially, intellectually, and on other levels in other domains of life, we're less able to do so because consciousness has become entrained in that narrowly fixated way. We're then walking victims ready to be triggered. And whatever it is that wants to program us, now I can draw from my experience as a hypnotherapist, we're in a fixated mode of attention. We're highly suggestible. We're easy to manipulate. And what else comes through on those screens? Everything else that the powers that be want us to think and feel and do. So this is really scary. So the more attention becomes fixated, the more we can be manipulated. So by having open awareness, or the ability to identify when we're in tunnel awareness, and the ability to then reopen awareness, will serve us really well so that we're less controlled by governments, organizations, institutes, perhaps even religions that we don't want to succumb to anymore. So I see that as a crucial life skill. And I feel very passionate to teach that to the younger generation for this very reason.
It seems to bring us back into an individualized reference point so that we can be discerning in alignment to our personal experience and values, rather than everything being an influence of external information and circumstances and stimuli outside of ourselves, like from religions or governments or when you said the powers that be. I think that it is really important that that people don't only think of this intentional conspiracy that is inflicted on the world, where there may be some of that, but there is a desire even for people to participate in this, because the rewards are happening. You're rewarded by giving the market this shortened attention aspect. That's why I like these conversations. This podcast format is a long form conversation with a transformative expert like yourself, Jevon, and we get the opportunity to be in a not fractured thing, a more whole conversation, and there's a lot of value in embodying that in a conversation, in media, in entertainment, in education, in ways that are just like keeping us whole. So the social media aspect that you're speaking to now, that was what I originally was really fascinated by, your presentation in open awareness in Prague in 2017, was that you were bringing in this narrow focus. So when we're like waking up, a lot of people even that are listening to this maybe have run into the bad habit of waking up, looking at their phone. Maybe that's where their alarm is, or the time is, or they're figuring out the day or the weather. And then they maybe find themselves having gone down the rabbit hole of their phone. And so right away, from the moment they are waking up, their vision is narrowing and narrowing and narrowing, and it's narrowing onto the phone. And now they're sort of walking through the world with these blinders on, until maybe they go to sleep and wake up again, and then sort of start in an open awareness, but then it narrows so quickly in our modern world.
Yeah, yeah. Thank goodness we get to go to sleep at night and get a break from all of that. But what a way to live the waking hours of the day, as a victim of a system that is designed to capture attention. And when we are attention slaves to those powers that be, and I don't want to paint a negative picture of the scenario in the world, but attention slavery happens, and we do it to ourselves. If you rely on that gadget, you rely on it to do the thinking for you, and to externalize your sense of self, really. And so the inner experience becomes less and less of a familiar territory. And so we lose ourselves. We lose ourselves to whatever it is that would like to, to benefit from a lost self. And I think the more awakened people there are, and by awakened, I mean people that go around with an embodied state of open awareness, the more we're going to find a deeper sense of connection, camaraderie amongst conscious individuals, and we're going to counterbalance some of what has been going kind of away from the natural course of living, I think, that goes back hundreds of years. It's aggravated and amplified by conditions in the world today, perhaps, but these are symptoms of things that have been going out of their natural way of being for many generations. And so it's not just the powers that be today that might be to blame for our inauthentic ways, but colonization, going back many hundreds of years, for example, the industrial age, all these major turning points that have been turning points that are not in favor of us becoming more fully human, but more enslaved by a system that has lost touch with its origins, I think.
Right, a system that's lost touch with humanity, like these very human ways of being in the world. We are slaves to it, because it's so much a part of the engineering of our economy, and how we are just able to be in the market when we are looking for jobs, and we're looking to be a part of the social structures in our day-to-day activity. If we've missed out on some information, our social structures are now falling apart. That it is a strange time to be alive, but what I hear you saying is that this is happening. This has also always been happening. This is not just recent times. Our attention naturally does this. It naturally narrows into when we are in a deep emotional experience, where we're emotionally charged by anger or anxiety. We're scared, we're nervous. Those fight or flight responses. Our vision, our awareness is very narrow in those times as well. And so what does somebody do to have a more embodied state of open awareness?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you. And I think we can learn a lot from how our fellow beings in nature handle such situations. And if we can use the analogy of the gazelle that on its lucky day outruns the attack of the lion, and the lion's now gone, what do we see the gazelle doing? Maybe you've seen this in a documentary, or you've actually had the benefit of seeing this in the wild. Typically, it shakes off the trauma, the energy, the built up energy of it trembles and it grounds itself, it shakes it through and out. And within a minute or so, it's back to grazing. It's got its appetite back, which means it's no longer in fight and flight response, right? The gazelle would have been in flight, not necessarily fight, but flight comes to us very naturally as a consequence of attention becoming fixated on something that is of sincere danger, a real crucial situation. And that's what the survival response is built into us for. And thankfully we have it. It's gotten us to where we are today as the human species. But as a species who continue to operate in that narrowly fixated way, we never really return, as the gazelle does, to having that broad perspective of the landscape around us, but a calm and responsive way of being that's not hypervigilant. Hypervigilance is once again back into fight and flight. And we can't really continue to live a good life in that way, because we'll always be on edge, easily triggered, and we'll always overreact or underreact as a result of that. So by embodying the state of open awareness through microdosing, simple practices that do not take excessive amounts of time, not an hour of meditation, let alone a week in a retreat, but daily, consistent microdoses, as I say, of simple exercises, which I'd be glad to demonstrate, then each time we do such an exercise, we have at least some degree of somatic open awareness. And through consistent practice, that somatic open awareness becomes more ingrained. It goes from being a resourceful state into an embodied trait. And when it's an embodied trait in a specific context in which it's being practiced, then it's readily available to us. It becomes more of our default mode, a more natural mode. Indeed, it is a natural mode of being. It's nothing we're kind of synthesizing and programming ourselves to be as. It is, in fact, a return to being natural, to being nature, and to being in the world as nature. So if now is a good time, I could give it a very simple.
This is a great time to let the tribe know about the Gray Transforms website, graytransforms.com. This is a great place to go to check out all the links to the podcast. It's a great place to support the podcast, to support the channel. You can get a Gray Transforms t-shirt with a transegoic gnosis symbol for transformation on the back. You can get a Gray Transforms bullet journal. This is a simple tool, but this is a tool for mastery. You can get stickers. You can get a Gray Transforms mug. So you can drink great tea in your Gray Transforms mug while you are taking notes in your Gray Transforms bullet journal, while you are listening to high-level transformative conversations on the Gray Transforms podcast. So comment, like, share, subscribe, follow, and together this tribe is moving humanity forward. Let's get back to this conversation.
Yeah, it would be awesome for you to give one of these simple practices. This idea of microdosing the practices is really awesome and entertaining. This microdosing the practices, but and that it is not something you're building on top, but a returning to a whole, fully functional beingness. And from that place is where people are actualizing themselves, actualizing what it is that is most aligned and resonant with their way of being in the world. But if you're never in a practice of returning back to that state of wholeness, then you're constantly fragmented, constantly at ends with the external world to just in the suffering, in the muck of anxiety and fight or flight and all of these negative things that continue to fracture and pull us apart. So the microdosing of practices, are you saying that this is a good habit forming, this is that it's a good habit to form, it's informing our states of consciousness on either side of conscious and subconscious? Is this just a habit that you have? Do you get into these practices on a daily basis? You mentioned it's sort of ongoing for you in these times.
In these times, if we think about the pandemic that is still there, has recently been there, I think it has become crucial to have a practice in order just to optimize the conditions in our consciousness for actualization, for optimal performance, for being fully present, for being aware of our inner landscapes and the world around us, and for cultivating that deeper sense of interconnection in a world that has become relatively antisocial. It's coming back to our kind of social intelligence, feeling that connection and being in the world as a connected person who feels a sense of belonging, even if they're not seeing their loved ones physically on a basis that they might like to. That deeper sense of connection and belonging is cultivated through open awareness. In fact, open awareness brings about 3 types of perception. There's introspection, being aware of thoughts, feelings, sensations, and emotions in the body. Then there's this exterior or outrospection of the people, the space around us, the world around us, and being responsive to that, as we spoke about just before. And then there's something I call envirospection, a deeper sense of connection to the environment, to nature, to earth, to our planet as a whole. And that deeper sense of belonging as an important part of nature. That's that deeper sense of connection that open awareness also helps to cultivate. And so when those 3 kinds of perception become embodied, then we are living a good life, at least most of the time, for as long as we're in open awareness. And then, of course, we'll be triggered because we're still humans in this body, and we all have traumas, and we all have stuff that is going on in the world right now. And this stuff will affect us. We won't try to create an immunity against all of that. In fact, we want to be able to feel a sense of aliveness, and that aliveness is not always a good feeling. It can be overwhelming. But if we make ourselves numb, then we're switched off and we're disconnected. And then we operate like zombies. And I think the world has more than enough zombies in it right now. We can activate that sense of aliveness. It's a safe thing to do. And in the larger frame of open awareness, we can actually feel a beautiful sense of deep acceptance of whatever is alive within us. And we can learn and grow and be in that state.
The world does have enough zombies, enough somnambulists, sleepwalking people. We do need more conscious, aware people. So practices like open awareness is fundamental. So why don't you instruct us? What is a little? What are one of these little habits, these little practices? Give us a microdose of open awareness.
Sure thing. So later today, I'll be doing this in an online setting with about 60 in a group. And it's an embodiment practice that involves a little bit more movement than the space I have available right now, in which I get on my feet and we move around in a very slow, gentle way. And this is what I call a Jumi practice. Jumi is an acronym for Judo Mind. And it's something I've been developing for over 20 years. It's the combination of the principles and philosophy of judo with transpersonal psychology, specifically applied open awareness. So I'll be very happy to share a link to the Jumi website, where there's a whole bunch of completely free tutorial videos where I teach and share exercises like the following one. Okay, so here's one. In Jumi, we start by dropping awareness into the body through the breath, by allowing inhalations in through the nose and long, slow, steady exhalations from the mouth. Eyes closed is useful because we get to focus on what's within and really feel into the sensation of each inhalation through the nose, and then release that breath very slow and long out from the mouth. And then continue to follow this cyclical breathing pattern with eyes closed or open for a few more breaths. It's those long, slow, steady exhalations that allow us to drop awareness fully into the body and to feel what's alive inside the body in this moment. And then feel the sturdy support of the surface where your body rests right now. The seat you're seated on, the surface below you, the solidity of earth that cradles and nurtures you. And now, as you continue to breathe in that way, you may allow your eyes to be open, and I'll demonstrate the next part of the exercise. I'm going to breathe in now, and I'm going to look at my fingertips as they're connected in front of my eyes. I'm breathing in and feeling the sensations between my fingertips. And as I begin that long, slow exhalation, my hands are drawn wide by the exhaling breath. The breath breathes those hands out wide, and all the time my eyes remain aware of those hands out here in the periphery. The inhalation through the nose brings those hands together again, and I literally see and feel that light touch between the fingers. The long, slow exhalation from the mouth breathes those hands wide, breathes awareness into the periphery. I'm aware of these hands here in the periphery, but still looking forward. I breathe the hands together again, see and feel a light touch between the fingers. Exhale slowly from the mouth. Continue looking forward, but see at the same time those hands going wide into the periphery. Breathe them in one more time, light touch. Slow exhalation from the mouth. Hands opening the aperture of awareness into the periphery. Breathe them in and let your hands return down to wherever they were. Allow the eyes to be closed. And now bring awareness to the entire volume of space that your whole body occupies. Breathing in whichever way is natural to you now. Become aware of the entire volume of space that your whole body occupies. Feeling into the sensation of spaciousness. And now notice what's alive inside you. And notice what you are present to in this moment. Then invite a full inhalation through the nose. Release it out long from the mouth. Allow the eyes to be open if they were closed. Returning to whichever awareness you like to return to. Feeling what's alive for you. Travis, how did you experience that?
I experienced that as very grounding. I even feel my voice, my speaking feels more grounded. Very subtle differences, but definitely experienced in maybe the tone and the execution of the words that are coming out of my mouth right now. I do feel a sense of patience, sense of being patient with myself, being patient with my words, just coming out of a groundedness. I am paying attention more to at the end you said you said which awareness, whatever awareness you want to go back to. Well, I want to stay in the open awareness. And so I love the idea of the practices or the experiences bringing about an insight and bringing that into your life. And so in this experience of open awareness, I want to invite the audience, I want to invite myself to bring this into my experience, stay with the open awareness. So I feel grounded when in a moment of after the hand breathing that we did, in the moment of closing my eyes and checking in with myself in that breathing, I was finding my mind to be much quieter, much more reserved and patient, able to collect the thoughts that wanted to be collected, not have this intrusion of thoughts that were not intended on being there.
Well done. That's great. And your report here is very similar to what I hear consistently from people that get familiar with this practice. Yes. A lot of people use the words of clarity and, this was a very small, quick exercise. And in fact, even this quick exercise can be abbreviated. It can be done in 3 breaths, and you don't even need to wave any hands around. When you know about the tool of using hands to bring awareness back open, you can imagine those hands without even using them, which means you can use it discreetly in any situation where you might like to do that.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is we're mimicking the shift between attention and awareness. Awareness is diffused, and we have an awareness in which we are less identified from that which attention is fixated on. And if we don't ever do a practice that enables us to disconnect and disidentify from what attention is fixated on, then we become identified with those aspects of the self. They become hardwired in our neurology, and very soon we lose touch with everything else, as we were speaking about just before. So this simple awarenessing exercise, and these are among the Jumi awarenessing videos that I'm very glad to share with your viewers and listeners, awarenessing, coming back to a soft, open, diffused awareness in which we can see what attention is up to. And we have the freedom to choose not to attend to things that attention is pulled toward, negative triggers perhaps. And then what we do choose to give attention to is a conscious choice that comes from a space of clarity and beingness and presence. So whatever we choose to do is preceded by being present. So actions are then inspired by presence. And I think that's a good thing. I feel that that's a very resourceful state. And there's patience with the self, patience with thoughts, patience with what's occurring. There's no hurry or urgency that's driving behavior, which enables us to be more resourceful again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that open awareness state of consciousness is a good foundational place to discern amongst the things that you would be going about having to make decisions on in your life. It is hard to make clear, decisive, actionable directives in your life. It's hard to execute on those when you have a constant intrusion of thoughts influenced by the external environment that were not intended on being there. But when you can be patient with yourself, when you can be grounded in an open awareness, then you're able to only bring in what using the mind when the mind needs to be used, when the tool wants to be available. and as opposed to it just overwhelming your experience. Are you familiar with the work of Andrew Newberg and Delacroix? There's a book called Why God Won't Go Away.
It rings a bell, but I'm not familiar with it.
It's a co-authored book. Andrew Newberg and Delacroix, like a French term maybe, or French name maybe. The book is called Why God Won't Go Away, and a really compelling title, but it is a neuroscience study on the states of consciousness that one experiences in meditative states. They did an experiment with Franciscan nuns and Tibetan Buddhists, and so they had these long trained veteran monks and veteran nuns do their practices. So the nuns are doing really intense like chanting and prayer in their practice, and the monks are sitting in meditation. And there were fMRI studies done around both of these experiences, and looking at the data and the qualitative data of how it's being described between both, and both are describing in a very similar way. But what was happening in the neurochemistry of the brain is that the areas of orientation to the space and to yourself, there was less activity in those areas. So it was described as a sense of dissolving of self and space, the separation between self and space. So we have certain orientation areas that allow us to know that I am taking this much space up in the room, and other and orientation areas to tell me how much like something, an item in the room is taking up space, and how big is the space that I exist inside of. So these several areas, and those orientation areas are almost always active in our lives. They have, there's a lot of ways that we are experiencing the world where those come into necessary function. But in these meditations or prayer, in these more mindful states of opening your awareness through the practices, these orientation areas, less activity is happening there. So you're experiencing a oneness with the awareness. And you had mentioned in the practice the being, when we had eyes closed, to be aware, or to be aware of, and to experience the volume, or put your awareness into the volume of the space. So it is everything that, when you're with your eyes closed, it's everything that you're able to see behind those eyes, but and beyond, filling into the space beyond. So as you were saying, that the attention is not narrow to these things that we become fixated upon or distracted by, but our open awareness can exist as one with ourselves and the space, be whole in the space.
Yeah. I think of open awareness as the container in which we have a sense of clarity and purpose, so that we attend consciously to that which truly needs our attention. And the overarching sort of approach that I teach is referred to as authentic self-empowerment. And applied open awareness is at the core of that, and the transpersonal coaching model, which I teach, is one of the action wings of this applied authentic self-empowerment approach. And so what I experience as the authentic self is that sense of wholeness, sense of coming into union with nature, that deeper sense of connection with everyone and everything in existence. The deeper we go into the practice, the more, for me anyway, and for many people that I've been speaking to over a couple of decades of exploring this work, These are common phenomena. And to the point of spaciousness, there is a spacious quality to one's experience of self in this practice. And we start to feel each other as unified in the space, yet we're also able to differentiate between self and other. So we can set clear boundaries, which is super important for us as coaches and therapists doing this kind of work. And there's something else. We're able to elongate the space between stimulus and response. That knee-jerk reaction, when attention gets fixated on something and we're triggered, typically when we overreact or underreact, it's because the space between stimulus and response is non-existent. The two are bound together, and we have an unconscious impulse that is what drives our thoughts, feelings, and behavior in that situation. Through open awareness, we inject spaciousness between stimulus and response. And through practice, that becomes embodied. And maybe that's the secret source of this particular process. The fact that there's more spaciousness in consciousness from which we get to choose consciously how to be in the world.
That's profound. That's really important, and just being able to be whole, spacious in your experience. You don't feel so shrunk. You don't feel so small. Your playing small does not serve the world, and so your playing small, not serving the world, is your too narrowly attentive, like not able to. Carl Rogers had spoke about the fully functioning person. A couple of times you spoke about being fully functioning as a human with your open awareness, and a part of that, what Carl Rogers described, was defenses that are created when you're not fully functioning. And so these defenses are necessary. You're defending, so you're kind of putting yourself into a smaller and smaller container until you're very tiny, and then you're just you're like claustrophobic inside of your own experience of self. But to expand beyond that, have a spaciousness, now you are free, you're more freely able to move and think and be in the world from a foundational place that is necessary, so that you can choose your way, choose how you're wanting to design and unfold the narrative of your life from that open awareness. I think is really powerful. What do you say to students or people that are experiencing, you mentioned working with athletes, what do you say to them, or what you obviously use these practices of open awareness and Judo Mind, you use these practices. So what do you say to somebody that is experiencing resistance and experiencing the smallness of self, and experiencing sort of what I just described as that, maybe a claustrophobic, maybe they're feeling a lot of anxiety, unable to fulfill their life's calling and the performance in the ways that they want to be performing in the world?
Yeah. Well, I think what you're pointing to is a survival strategy. And it's the survival strategy of a part of the self, a part that has become disconnected from the rest of the self. And for good reasons, to protect itself from harm, typically based on earlier life experiences, maybe one defining experience, a big T trauma, or maybe small T traumas that have happened along the way that have undermined that person, creating a negative belief system about themselves. And when they contract in that way and shrink, hide, run away, these types of defenses are there to protect us from something that part of the self thinks may happen. And so, as I was suggesting earlier, it's in open awareness that we're able to identify, first of all, somatically, listening to the signs and signals and symbols of the body. And through that, very gently and compassionately identifying the part that is responsible for that defensiveness. And it's in open awareness where we get to have a compassionate-based internal dialogue with the part to establish its needs. Why is it acting that way in that specific context? We aim to understand the needs of the part, and then the authentic self pledges to fulfill the needs of that part. So the part is then no longer responsible to try to fulfill its own needs, which it was never capable of doing. All it could do is that old pattern of defensiveness. So a rapport becomes established between the authentic self and the part. And that in turn fosters integration. And through an embodiment practice to nurture that integration, there is healing. And the part becomes part of the family that it's always belonged to. There's a kind of homecoming. And in this way, we return to wholeness. And that's what the authentic self is, a returning to wholeness and being in the world as a whole being. And working with these parts, it's an ongoing, very exciting, sometimes challenging journey. But it's a journey of healing. And we're all on it, whether we know it or not. We can go kicking and screaming, or we can do it consciously. And I think the world can really benefit from more people who are engaging in this healing journey consciously. And that's what open awareness is about.
That is so beautifully said. Thank you so much, Jevon Dangeli. I really appreciate this conversation. I really appreciate our interaction. I appreciate connecting with you as a fellow transpersonal tribesman and being in this tribe of transpersonal psychology. So much value that people will be able to take away from this conversation about open awareness, bringing some of these into their lives, some of these practices, some of these microdosing of practices, simple breathing, simple opening the aperture of what you are able to observe in your vision, in your actual vision, not to be so narrow, to be actually opening your eye vision. I hope that people understand that very. I recall that in Prague, the way that you brought this to our attention was that we looked at our hand and then we looked beyond our hand. We looked at our hand, beyond our hand, at our hand, beyond our hand. And that looking at your hands and beyond your hands with one hand in front of your face, that starts to make you aware of how your vision changes. And then now you can look at when I'm looking at this right now, I'm looking at this camera, I'm looking at you, Jevon. And so I can also, in my open awareness, it feels somatically, experientially, I feel more grounded when my awareness is open, when I have opened my awareness. And what that looks like, what that is experienced like in my actual vision, my physical vision, is that I can see other things in the space. I'm not just seeing the camera, I'm seeing everything as a part of the visual experience. And that's just what I recalled from the Prague presentation. Was that accurate?
Yeah, it's about seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah,
recognizing your role within that bigger picture.
Yeah,
and one of the interesting qualities of open awareness is that it fosters ecological awareness. And in this context, I refer to ecological awareness as an awareness of the self, an awareness of the others, and an awareness of the broader environment.
Yeah.
The actions that open awareness naturally inspires us to take is always ecological. I get to benefit. The others that I'm interacting with in this context benefit, and the larger domain, the earth, benefits. And that type of ecological outcome is a very natural outpouring of applied open awareness.
Absolutely. Your role in the bigger picture is exactly it. And so the more that you are invested in being in the right state of consciousness, or maybe not the right, but a state of consciousness that is effective at bringing out the best in you, well, then your space starts to experience that. The environment around, the bigger space around that starts to experience that, and then you start to experience what your role can be and is in that bigger picture. That's really amazing. So how can people connect with you, or get some of these trainings? There's a website, there's where can people go to follow up on this open awareness practices?
Well, I hope that these will be mentioned in the description of wherever this goes.
Yeah.
But my own website has hundreds of completely free resources, video tutorials, audio recordings, articles, and a free ebook on open awareness. And that's jevondangeli.com, my first and surname.com. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Jumi website, which is jumi.live, jumi.live. And there you'll find all free tutorial videos on Jumi. And there's a category among those tutorial videos called awarenessing. And this was one of the awarenessing exercises we did today. And there's a whole list of awarenessing exercises and breathing exercises and similar that are available there. So that's all the free stuff. I offer the 1-year Transpersonal Coaching Psychology certificate program through Alef Trust. It begins every February. That's a fully booked course every year. So if anybody's interested, they should contact Alef Trust soon. I offer in-person transpersonal coach training through 6-day live on-site modules that take place in London each May, in October, November in a retreat setting in the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland where I live, and on demand in other locations too.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jevon.
You're so welcome. It's been really great.
That conversation with Jevon Dangeli is phenomenal. It reminds me to open my awareness, to not have such a narrow awareness and experience of life, to practice consciously opening my awareness every day as a transformation of my state of being in the world. He gives a micro exercise into the open awareness practices. Jevon Dangeli is an expert in transpersonal coaching. He helped to develop a transpersonal coaching program at Alef Trust. This conversation has the potential to change and transform your perspective on everyday living. So comment, like, share, subscribe. Share this with a friend, share this with a family member. Together we are moving humanity forward.